If you only hear fragments of the Yoga Sutras, it sounds like philosophy. But taken as a whole, it becomes a map, one that leads somewhere very specific. This is the complete Yoga Sutras, narrated in full with commentary. Book 1. Samadhi. Sutra 1. Now, the study of yoga begins. What is yoga? What yoga literally means is yoking. To yoke is to connect, to draw together. So yoga literally means union. Union with what? In short, union with the divine. This opening line sounds very simple, but it's intentional. Now doesn't just mean at this moment in time. It implies a readiness, a kind of internal condition. So what this really suggests is that yoga, or union with God, doesn't begin when you hear about it, read about it, or even when you begin to do some poses. It begins when something in you is ready to look inward. Sutra 2. Yoga is the stilling of the movements of the mind. This is the central definition. The mind is not static. It's constantly moving. Thoughts, reactions, memories, imagination, all of these are fluctuations. So yoga is not about adding something new. It's about removing interference. Because if the mind is always moving, then you're never actually seeing clearly. Sutra 3. Then the seer rests in its true nature. When the movements stop, something remains. What remains? The seer, also known as the witness. Not the thoughts, not the personality, but the awareness behind it all. This is a huge shift. It suggests that who you are is not what you think, but what is aware of thinking. Sutra 4. At other times, the seer identifies with the movements of the mind. When the mind is not still, something strange happens. Awareness becomes entangled with what it observes. This is basically the human condition. We don't just have thoughts, we become them. A thought appears, and suddenly that thought feels like you. That identification is the root of confusion. Sutra 5. The movements of the mind are of 5 kinds, some painful, some not. Patanjali now begins to classify the mental movements. Not all thoughts are harmful, but all of them are still movements. Even the good thoughts can still distort perception, because the goal here isn't to replace negative thinking with positive thinking. It's to go beyond the constant activity altogether. From here, Patanjali begins to map out the structure of the mind itself, breaking down the different types of mental activity and how they shape perception. And as we go deeper, something becomes clear. The problem is not the world. It's the way the mind constructs it. Sutra 6. These movements are correct perception, incorrect perception, imagination, deep sleep, and memory. The mind isn't just random noise. It follows patterns. Patanjali identifies 5 distinct types of mental activity. Everything you experience internally fits into one of these categories. This is important because it means that even when you think you're seeing clearly, you might still be inside a mental construct. Not all thoughts are equal, but all of them shape what you think is real. Sutra 7. Correct perception arises from direct experience, inference, and reliable testimony. So, not all knowledge is illusion. There are valid ways of knowing: direct perception, logical reasoning, and trusted sources. But even here, there is a subtle warning, because even correct perception is still filtered through the mind. It may be accurate, but it's not ultimate. Sutra 8. Incorrect perception is false knowledge, not based on what truly is. This is when the mind creates something that doesn't match reality, a misunderstanding, a projection, a distortion. And the key thing is, when you're in a state of incorrect perception, it doesn't feel false. It feels completely real. That's what makes it powerful and dangerous. Sutra 9. Imagination is knowledge based on words alone, without an actual object. This is the mind creating ideas with no direct experience behind them. Things like concepts, theories, and mental images. This is where a lot of quote-unquote spiritual thinking actually lives. Words without direct seeing. And the danger here is that you can feel like you understand something without ever experiencing it. Sutra 10. Deep sleep is a state where there is an absence of mental content, yet the mind remains. Even when thoughts disappear, the mind doesn't vanish. There's still a kind of underlying state. So this shows that no thoughts doesn't automatically mean awareness. Sleep is still unconscious. Yoga is pointing to something else, a clear stillness, not just emptiness. Sutra 11. Memory is the retention of past experiences. Memory stores impressions, and those impressions influence how you see the present. So you're never just seeing what's in front of you, you're seeing it through everything that came before, which means most of what you call reality is actually recognition. Sutra 12. These movements are stilled through practice and detachment. Now Patanjali gives the method. 2 forces: consistent effort and letting go. This is a balance. If you only try to control the mind, you create tension. If you only let go, you drift. Stillness comes from both effort and release. Sutra 13. Practice is the effort to remain established in stillness. Practice isn't about doing more. It's about returning again and again to steadiness. So progress here isn't measured by intensity. It's measured by stability. How often can you come back to awareness itself? Sutra 14. Practice becomes firmly grounded when continued for a long time, without interruption, and with sincerity. This isn't something that happens quickly. It requires consistency, patience, and genuine commitment. There are no shortcuts here, because the mind you're working with has been conditioned for years. So the process is less like a breakthrough and more like a gradual clearing. Sutra 15. Detachment is freedom from craving for what is seen or heard. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means not being pulled by every experience. This is where real freedom starts, because as long as something can pull you, it controls you. Detachment isn't about losing life, it's about no longer being driven by it. Now, at this point, something else begins to take shape. The mind is not just random. It follows patterns, as we said before, and those patterns can be trained. Patanjali now is about to go deeper into all the different possible levels of stillness and what lies beyond them. Sutra 16. Higher detachment arises when there is freedom even from the qualities of nature through direct knowledge of the self. There are levels to detachment. At first, it means stepping back from external experiences, things you see, hear, and react to. But this deeper level goes even further. It is detachment even from the inner structure of the mind itself. This suggests something radical, that even clarity, insight, and understanding are still within the field of the mind, and true freedom lies beyond all of that. Sutra 17. Absorption with awareness involves reasoning, reflection, bliss, and a sense of individuality. Now, Patanjali begins describing different states of stillness. In this stage, the mind becomes deeply focused, but some structure still remains. There is still thinking, subtle reflection, even a sense of, I am experiencing this. So even elevated states of consciousness are not the final step. They are refined, but still partial, because as long as there is an experiencer, there is still separation. Sutra 18. Beyond this is another state, where all mental impressions cease, leaving only latent traces. Here, even those subtle structures fall away. Thought, reflection, identity, all become silent. But something still remains in potential, like seeds beneath the surface, which means even deep stillness is not yet complete freedom. Sutra 19. Some attain this state through birth or through subtle absorption in nature. There are individuals who seem to naturally access higher states, whether through past conditioning or innate tendencies. But this comes with a quiet warning. Just because a state arises easily doesn't mean it's stable or final. Without understanding, it can fade. Sutra 20. For others, it is attained through faith, energy, memory, deep concentration, and insight. For most people, the path is gradual. It unfolds through trust in the process, sustained effort, remembering the state, and deepening focus. So this is a progression. Each element supports the next, and over time, something stabilizes, not because it was forced, but because it was cultivated. Sutra 21. For those who are intensely committed, realization comes more quickly. Intensity does matter. The more focused and unwavering the effort, the faster the transformation. It's not about rushing, but it is about clarity of intention. When there's no inner conflict, energy stops being scattered. Sutra 22. Even among these, there are differences: mild, moderate, and intense. Not all effort is the same. There are degrees of commitment. And this is something you can observe directly. How much of your attention is actually aligned with what you're seeking? Because that determines the pace. Sutra 23. Or, realization may come through surrender to the divine. Here, a different approach appears. Instead of effort, we have surrender, letting go into something greater. This shifts the entire dynamic, because now it's no longer about control, it's about release. And for some, this is the more direct path. Sutra 24. The divine is a special kind of consciousness, untouched by suffering, action, or conditioning. This divine is not described as a figure, but as a pure form of awareness, unaffected and unconditioned. So again, this is not pointing to belief, it's pointing to a state of being, completely free from the patterns that shape ordinary experience. Sutra 25. In this, the seed of all knowledge is fully developed. This state contains complete knowing, not learned, but inherent. It suggests that knowledge is not something we acquire, but something that becomes visible when distortion is removed. Sutra 26. This consciousness is beyond time and is the teacher of all teachers. It's not limited by present or past. It's fundamental, which means what you're seeking is not something new. It's something that's always been there. Sutra 27. Its expression is the sound Om. This state is symbolized by a vibration, Om. Not just a sound, but a representation of totality. The idea here is not about repetition alone, but about turning attention to something more fundamental than thought. Sutra 28. Repetition of this sound and contemplation of its meaning leads inward. Sound here becomes a tool, a way to focus and refine awareness. But the key is not mechanical repetition, it's depth of attention, because without that, it's just noise. Sutra 29. From this, awareness turns inward, and obstacles begin to dissolve. As attention stabilizes, something shifts. The mind stops projecting outward. And when that happens, many of the struggles that seemed external start to lose their grip. Sutra 30. The obstacles are illness, dullness, doubt, carelessness, laziness, attachment, false perception, failure to progress, and instability. Patanjali now names the main barriers. These are the forces that disrupt clarity. What's interesting is that these aren't random problems. They're patterns of energy and attention, and once you see them clearly, they start to lose their power. At this stage, the path becomes more precise. The obstacles are not just named, they're understood. And once something is clearly seen, we can begin to change it. Sutra 31. These obstacles are accompanied by distress, despair, restlessness of the body, and irregular breathing. When the mind is disturbed, it doesn't stay isolated. It affects the whole system. The emotions, the body, even the breath begin to reflect the imbalance. This is important because it shows that the mind is not separate from the body. So working with attention also begins to stabilize everything else in our lives. Sutra 32. To overcome these obstacles, practice focusing on a single principle. Scattered attention creates instability. Focused attention creates order. The mind becomes complicated when it's divided, but when attention is unified, everything begins to settle. Sutra 33. Peace of mind is cultivated through friendliness, compassion, joy, and equanimity toward all experiences. Emotional patterns influence mental clarity. These attitudes stabilize the inner environment. This isn't just moral advice, it's practical, because negative reactions keep the mind moving, and these qualities reduce that movement. Sutra 34. Or through regulation of the breath. Breath and mind are closely related. Changing one affects the other. So even something simple, like slowing the breath, can begin to quiet the mind. It acts as a direct entry point. Sutra 35. Or by focusing on subtle sensory perceptions. Focusing on faint, refined sensory experiences, like the gentle tickle of breath on your upper lip, or a soft inner glow from a closed eyelid, or the lingering vibration of Om, steadies the restless mind. These subtle perceptions act as a natural anchor, pulling attention inward and away from everyday distractions, building unshakable concentration. Sutra 36. Or by meditating on inner light. Another method, focusing on a sense of clarity or luminosity within. This points towards something experiential, not imagined light, but a quality of awareness that feels clear and steady. Sutra 37. Or by contemplating a mind that is free from attachment. Observing someone or something that's already stable can help stabilize your own mind. Attention takes on the qualities of what it rests on, so what you focus on matters deeply. Sutra 38. Or by reflecting on experiences from deep sleep or dreams. Even subtle states can become objects of awareness. This expands the field of observation, showing that awareness can exist even beyond waking experience. Sutra 39. Or by meditating on anything that brings stability. The method is flexible. What matters is the result. steadiness. So the path is not rigid. It adapts to what actually works for you. Sutra 40. The mind of one who has mastered this ranges from the smallest to the greatest. With stability, attention becomes powerful. It can move freely, without distortion. This is where control shifts. Instead of being pulled by the mind, you can direct it. Sutra 41. When the mind becomes clear, it reflects reality without distortion, like a transparent crystal. A steady mind doesn't interfere. It simply reflects what is. This is the opposite of how we normally experience things. Usually, we project onto reality. Here, projection stops. Sutra 42. In this state, perception is mixed with words and concepts. At first, clarity is still blended with interpretation. You're seeing more clearly, but still labeling, still thinking. Sutra 43. When memory is purified, perception becomes free from conceptual overlay. As conditioning fades, perception becomes direct. This is a major shift. Seeing without immediately naming, without filtering. Sutra 44. This applies even to the most subtle levels of experience. Clarity deepens. Even the finest aspects of perception become transparent. Nothing is too subtle to be seen clearly as long as the mind remains steady. Sutra 45. These subtle states extend to the very root of nature. Perception can reach extremely deep levels, but even here, you're still within the field of experience. Sutra 46. All these states still involve a seed. There is still something present, a trace, a potential, which means even the highest states so far are not final. Sutra 47. When clarity becomes completely pure, there is a state of inner luminosity. At this level, the mind is almost entirely transparent. Awareness begins to stand on its own, less filtered, less shaped. Sutra 48. In this state, truth is directly known. Not through reasoning, not through belief, but through immediate perception. This is knowledge without thought, seeing without interpretation. Sutra 49. This knowledge is different from ordinary knowledge, which comes from words or inference. There's a distinction between conceptual understanding and direct knowing. One is second-hand, the other is immediate. Sutra 50. The impressions formed in this state prevent other impressions from arising. This clarity begins to overwrite conditioning. The mind starts to reorganize itself around stillness. Sutra 51. When even this impression is transcended, all seeds cease and complete stillness remains. Finally, even the last trace dissolves. There is no movement, no residue. Book 2. Sadhana. 1. Discipline, self-study, and surrender to a higher reality. These constitute the practice of yoga. The path begins simply, not with complexity, but with 3 movements: effort, awareness, and letting go. You refine yourself, you observe yourself, and you release the need to control everything. These 3 attitudes, this work, is where real practice begins. 2. This practice reduces the causes of suffering and leads towards clarity. Practice doesn't instantly transform you. It clears a space. Clarity isn't something that's added. Rather, it's what remains when the noise begins to fade away. 3. The causes of suffering are ignorance, ego, attachment, aversion, and fear of death. Everything that disturbs the mind can be traced back to these 5 patterns. When you understand the roots, you stop getting lost in the surface. 4. Ignorance is the source from which the others arise. Not seeing clearly is the starting point. When perception is distorted, everything built on top of it inherits that distortion. 5. Ignorance is mistaking the impermanent for permanent, the impure for pure, the painful for pleasant, and the non-self for the self. The mind tends to mislabel reality. It assigns stability where there is none, identity where there's only experience. This is the core confusion. You take what you experience to be what you are. 6. Ego is the identification of the observer with what is observed. Awareness blends with what it sees and forgets itself. A thought appears, and instead of seeing the thought, you become it. 7. Attachment arises from pleasure. What feels good, the mind wants to hold on to. Clinging begins the moment you say, "I need this to stay." 8. Aversion arises from pain. What hurts, the mind pushes away. Avoidance binds you just as much as attachment. 9. Fear of death is deeply rooted, even in the wise. This isn't intellectual, it's instinct. Even when you understand, something deeper still holds you. So now the pattern is clear. The mind doesn't suffer randomly. It follows a structure. And if it has a structure, it can be understood. And if it can be understood, it can be changed. 10. These patterns can be resolved at their subtle level. You don't wait until they become overwhelming. The earlier you see it, the less power it has. 11. Their active forms are reduced through meditation. Stillness reveals patterns. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. 12. These patterns shape future experience. What you carry inside doesn't stay inside. Your inner state becomes your outer reality. 13. As long as these roots remain, they influence life and experience. Nothing is random. The deeper causes keep expressing themselves. 14. Experiences are felt as pleasure or pain depending on these causes. The same world, but a different perception. It's not just what happens, it's how it's seen. 15. To one who sees clearly, everything contains a degree of suffering. Because everything changes. What you cling to cannot stay, and that tension creates suffering. At this point, it could feel heavy, but this isn't pessimistic, it's precise, because the moment you see the cause, you're no longer completely inside it. 16. Future suffering can be avoided. This is the turning point. You are not locked in. 17. Suffering comes from the confusion between the observer and the observed. Awareness forgets itself. You are not the movement of the mind, but the one who is aware of it. 18. The seen consists of the elements and the senses and exists for experience and liberation. The world isn't random or meaningless. It's structured in a way that allows experience to happen at all, through the senses, through interaction, through perception. Everything you encounter is part of that system. What's important is that it has a purpose, not just to be lived through blindly, but to be understood. The same world that entangles you also contains the possibility of freeing you. 19. The qualities of nature operate at different levels, from subtle to gross. Reality isn't flat. There are layers to it, some obvious, some barely noticeable. What you see on the surface is only the densest expression of something much more subtle underneath. If you only pay attention to what's visible, you miss most of what's actually shaping your experience. 20. The observer is pure awareness, but appears to take on the qualities of what it observes. Awareness itself doesn't change. It doesn't become angry or anxious or attached. But it feels like it does, because it reflects whatever is passing through it. Like a clear surface taking on the color of what's placed in front of it. The mistake is thinking the reflection is what you are. 21. The world exists for the sake of the observer. Without awareness, there is no experience. Everything that appears to something. This doesn't mean that the world revolves around you personally, but that experience itself only exists because there is something aware of it. 22. Once its purpose is fulfilled, the world no longer binds, even though it continues to exist. Nothing needs to disappear in order for you to become free. The world can remain exactly as it is, only your relationship to it has changed. What once pulled you in no longer has that force. It's not about escaping life. It's about no longer being caught in it. 23. The union of the observer and the observed is the cause of experience. Experience happens because awareness and what is seen come together. That blending is what creates the sense of, I am experiencing this. Without that connection, there is no personal experience, only pure awareness. 24. Ignorance is the cause of this union. The connection itself isn't the issue, it's the confusion within it. Awareness forgets that it is separate from what it observes, and instead of witnessing experience, it becomes identified with it. That's where the problems begin. 25. When ignorance ends, this false identification ends. That is freedom. Nothing new is added. Something false is removed. When the confusion drops, awareness is no longer tangled in what it sees. And that absence of confusion, that clarity, is what liberation actually is. 26. Uninterrupted discernment is the means to freedom. It's not about having one clear moment. It's about staying clear, seeing again and again what's real and what's not. That consistency is what gradually breaks the pattern. 27. This clarity develops in stages. There isn't a single leap. It unfolds. Understanding deepens, stabilizes, and becomes more natural over time. You don't force it. You continue refining it. 28. Through consistent practice, impurities are reduced and wisdom arises. Practice isn't symbolic. It actually changes the system. What is reactive becomes quieter. What is unclear becomes more defined. And slowly, something more stable begins to take its place. 29. The 8 limbs of yoga are ethical discipline, personal observances, posture, breath control, withdrawal of the senses, concentration, meditation, and absorption. This is the structure of the path. These are not random techniques, but a progression. It begins with how you live and act, and moves inward toward how you perceive and experience reality itself. 30. Nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, moderation, and non-greed are the restraints. These are not just moral guidelines. They reduce friction, internally and externally. When your actions are aligned and non-harmful, the mind has less to react to, less to defend, less to justify. 31. These restraints are universal, regardless of circumstance. They're not situational. They point to something fundamental about how human experience functions. When they are ignored, instability increases. When they are lived, things begin to settle. 32. Cleanliness, contentment, discipline, self-study, and surrender are the observances. These turn the focus inward, not just how you act in the world, but how you shape your inner state. They create the conditions for clarity to develop. 33. When disturbed by negative thoughts, cultivate their opposite. You don't just suppress or fight patterns, you redirect them. If the mind turns toward harm, you introduce non-harm. If it moves toward agitation, you introduce steadiness. Over time, this begins to rewire the default tendencies. 34. Negative actions, whether done, caused, or approved, lead to suffering. It's not just what you do directly. What you support, encourage, or allow also shapes your mind. Everything you align with leaves an imprint. 35. In the presence of true nonviolence, hostility ceases. This isn't forceful, it's a shift in energy. When there is no aggression in you, it stops being reinforced in your environment. The effect is subtle, but real. 36. When established in truth, actions naturally produce results. There's no distortion. What is said and what happens begin to align more directly, because nothing is being manipulated or hidden anymore. 37. When free from stealing, abundance arises. Not because you acquire more, but because the sense of lack decreases. When you stop taking, grasping, or comparing, you start to develop a new relationship with what you have. 38. Moderation preserves energy. When energy isn't scattered through excess, it becomes available to you. That stability supports deeper focus and clarity. 39. Non-possessiveness leads to understanding the deeper patterns of life. When you stop clinging, you begin to see more clearly. You're no longer looking through the lens of mine, and that opens a different kind of perception. 40. Cleanliness leads to a natural detachment from the body. Cleanliness in this sutra isn't just about washing the body. It's the cultivation of purity in thought, environment, and action. As this inner and outer purity deepens, the attachment to the body begins to loosen. You start to see the body as part of the natural world, cared for but not confused with the self that observes it. Through clarity, not rejection, the sense of I am the body gives way to a subtler awareness of being. 41. Inner purity brings clarity, focus, and self-awareness. When the mind is less cluttered, it becomes easier to see, not just outwardly, but inwardly as well. 42. Contentment gives rise to a deep and lasting happiness. It isn't the fleeting pleasure that comes from novelty or stimulation, but a quiet sense of fullness that doesn't depend on circumstances. When one learns to rest in what is, peace becomes steady and self-sustaining. 43. Discipline purifies and strengthens both body and mind. Through steady practice, energy gathers and becomes clear. It's a process of refinement where you learn to stay centered and unwavering. 44. Through self-study, deeper understanding arises. You begin to notice the patterns that shape your thoughts and actions. Insight comes not as theory, but through direct experience of your own nature. 45. Surrender opens the way to union with the highest reality. At some point, striving reaches its limit, and release becomes the true path forward. In letting go, effort gives way to grace. 46. Posture is meant to be steady, and at ease. It's a position the body can sustain without strain or tension. When comfort and stability meet, attention is freed from the body. 47. As effort softens and awareness deepens, posture naturally settles. Stillness arises on its own, balanced and effortless. The body becomes grounded, and the mind begins to rest. 48. Then you are no longer disturbed by opposites. Heat and cold, comfort and discomfort, pleasure and pain. They lose their hold. 49. Breath regulation follows mastery of posture. Once the body is steady, the breath can be observed and refined. It becomes intentional rather than automatic. 50. Breath is refined through rhythm, duration, and gentle control. There is intentional structure in how we breathe, an art of shaping the flow of life within us. Through this refinement, the breath becomes a bridge between body and mind. 51. As practice deepens, the breath grows subtle. It finds its own rhythm, moving with quiet precision. Breathing becomes less about control and more about attunement, a natural harmony between inner and outer movement. 52. When the breath is steady and clear, it lifts the veil that clouds perception. Because the mind and breath are woven together, calming one reveals the truth of the other. Stillness of breath allows insight to shine unobstructed. 53. With clarity restored, the mind becomes ready for deep concentration. It rests in balance, steady, focused, and unshaken. Distraction fades, and awareness turns inward with ease. 54. The senses withdraw from their objects. Attention is no longer pulled outward automatically. It begins to turn inward. 55. This leads to mastery over the senses. You are no longer controlled by what you perceive. There is space between stimulus and response, and in that space, there is freedom. Book 3, Vibhuti. 1. Concentration is the practice of holding the mind steadily on one object. Most of the time, attention flickers from one thing to the next, a thought, a sound, a memory, a feeling. Concentration is the gentle discipline of returning the mind again and again to a single point. This point can be inside or outside the body. It can be an external object, a word, a breath, an image, or a feeling. 2. Meditation is the continuous flow of attention toward that object. At first, the mind may still wander even as you try to focus, but slowly the nature of the wandering changes. The interruptions become shorter, the returns quicker, the sense of effort subtler. Gradually, the mind learns to stay on its object like a lens that's finally come into focus. This is the ground from which the deeper states of meditation will arise. 3. Absorption occurs when only the object shines forth, as if the mind itself disappears. In absorption, the final trace of "I am focusing on this" falls away. There is no distance between the one who sees and what is seen. There is only the object, luminous and unbroken. For that moment, subject and object have become one. 4. These three, concentration, meditation, and absorption, together form samyama. Concentration, meditation, and absorption are not three different practices, but three phases of the same process. Patanjali sometimes calls this bundle samyama, a kind of inner instrument that can be directed toward any object. When the mind is that precise, it stops bouncing off the surface of experience and begins to penetrate deeper structures, patterns, and dimensions of reality. 5. From this inner discipline, insight and mastery begin to arise. Samyama, or perfect discipline, is not just a spiritual technique. It's a way of knowing. When the mind is steady, subtle, and unified, it can perceive what is normally hidden. Patterns of thought, the structure of the body, the nature of the senses, even the fabric of time and space. These are no longer opaque. Through sustained, clear attention, the inner world becomes transparent. 6. This mastery develops gradually, in stages. You don't jump straight into deep absorption. It unfolds step by step, with refinement, over time. 7. These three practices are more internal than the previous limbs of yoga. The first 5 limbs of yoga were mostly external or preparatory, how you relate to the world, to your body, and to your breath. Concentration, meditation, and absorption are the inner work, where the mind itself becomes the field of practice. Everything that came before supports this inward turn, which is more intimate and more delicate. 8. Even these are external compared to seedless absorption. As deep as samyama is, there's still a subtler state beyond it, where even the object of meditation falls away. 9. When the mind moves from distraction towards stillness, and that stillness becomes established, transformation occurs. The mind that has been trained in concentration no longer jumps erratically from one thing to the next. It moves in a continuous, gentle rhythm, like a calm tide rather than a stormy sea. Each moment arises and passes, but the awareness that observes them stays steady, like the sky that remains unchanged as clouds drift by. 10. As this stillness deepens, it becomes a steady and natural state. Even as the mind becomes more unified, there is still a subtle sense of, I am holding this together. Patanjali points to the moment when even that faint residue of management begins to soften. The mind isn't forced into stillness, it naturally settles into a state of balance, like a stone that has found its place at the bottom of a clear pool. 11. When distractions fade and one-pointedness arises, the mind becomes unified. The usual filters, desire, fear, distraction, opinion, lose their hold. The mind becomes like clear water, reflecting what is without adding color or distortion. In this transparency, perception becomes direct. There is no need to interpret, justify, or resist. Things simply show up as they are. 12. Through this clarity, the true nature of objects and processes begins to reveal itself. When the mind is no longer clouded by its own habits, it can see the way things actually arise, change, and pass. It perceives the subtle currents of thought, the stages of feeling, the structure of the senses. Objects are no longer just things out there. They are patterns of energy and awareness that can be understood from within. 13. Through this, the transformations of the elements, the senses, and the mind can be understood. Every object carries latent possibilities that are not obvious on the surface. When the mind is still and unified, it can touch those hidden dimensions. The same situation, the same person, the same feeling may reveal layers that were previously invisible. Perception becomes refined to the point where the usual veil thins. 14. Each object is defined by its underlying nature, even as it passes through different states. Everything changes: form, condition, appearance, but there is still an underlying continuity that makes something what it is. This sutra points to the relationship between what changes and what remains consistent. 15. Differences in transformation arise from differences in sequence. Change doesn't happen at random. It unfolds in an order. When the sequence changes, the outcome changes as well. By seeing this progression clearly, the yogi begins to understand how one state becomes another. This insight prepares the mind to perceive the deeper movement of time itself. 16. By applying samyama to the process of change, knowledge of the past and future arises. Everything is in process. What has been, what is unfolding, and what is still latent. When the yogi perceives these transformations clearly, time is no longer experienced as a mystery or a barrier. The past can be traced through its impressions, and the future can be sensed through the tendencies already present now. In this way, the movement of time becomes transparent to awareness. 17. By applying samyama to sound, meaning, and mental reaction, one understands all forms of communication. Normally, we mix up what is said, what it means, and how we react to it. By separating these, you gain a much deeper understanding of language and communication. 18. By direct insight into the latent impressions, knowledge of past lives arises. The mind carries the traces of all that it has experienced. When these impressions are seen clearly, they reveal the deeper continuity of the soul's journey. Patterns, tendencies, and unresolved movements are understood not only in terms of this life, but as part of a much longer unfolding. What is remembered goes beyond biography into a deeper stream of becoming. 19. By applying samyama to the mind of another, one can understand its contents. When awareness becomes refined, it can recognize the mental patterns operating in another person. This isn't casual mind reading, but rather a refined sensitivity that allows you to perceive what is happening in another person's mind. Thoughts, emotions, and tendencies can be perceived with unusual clarity. Such insight arises from subtle attunement, not intrusion. 20. Yet the deeper source of those thoughts is not thereby known, as that remains hidden. Even with deeper perception, the root of another's mind, their deeper conditioning or sense of self, is not directly accessible in the same way. 21. By applying samyama to the form of the body and suspending its perceptibility, it becomes invisible. This is described as invisibility, but the deeper idea is that perception depends on conditions. If those conditions are altered, what is normally seen may no longer be perceived. 22. In the same way, other sensory perceptions can be suspended. This principle applies beyond sight. Sound, touch, and other sensory experiences can also be influenced or withdrawn through deep practice. 23. By applying samyama to karma, whether active or latent, knowledge of the timing of events, including one's death, arises. Karma here refers to patterns set in motion. By understanding these patterns, their unfolding, including their endpoint, can be perceived. 24. By focusing on qualities like friendliness or compassion, those qualities become strengthened. When the mind is fully absorbed in goodwill, compassion, and kind regard, those qualities cease to be moral ideas and become active strengths. What is steadily contemplated is gradually embodied. 25. By focusing on strength, one gains strength. This can be understood both mentally and physically. Directing attention toward a quality reinforces and develops it. 26. By focusing on inner light, knowledge of subtle and hidden things arises. When awareness becomes clear and penetrating, it can perceive what normally escapes notice. The mind is no longer confined to what is immediate or outwardly visible. 27. By focusing on the sun, knowledge of the structure of the world arises. The sun becomes a point of entry into the larger order of existence. Through that contemplation, awareness begins to grasp the structure and interrelation of the realms of life. 28. By focusing on the moon, knowledge of cycles and rhythms arises. The moon is associated with cycles, time, change, repetition. This reflects understanding patterns that repeat and evolve. the mind begins to recognize a wider harmony moving through the cosmos. 29. By focusing on the pole star, knowledge of movement and orientation arises. By fixing the mind on what stands steady, awareness begins to perceive the order within motion. What seemed scattered in the heavens reveals itself as pattern, rhythm, and alignment. 30. By focusing on the navel center, knowledge of the body's organization arises. The navel becomes a gateway to understanding the body from within. Attention directed inward reveals how the body functions as an integrated system. 31. By focusing on the throat, hunger and thirst can be subdued. This reflects influence over bodily drives, showing how deeply the mind and body are connected. 32. By focusing on the channel within the chest, steadiness is attained. The kurma nerve is associated with stillness and stability. When attention rests there, the body and mind become quiet and unmoving. 33. By focusing on the light at the crown of the head, vision of higher beings arises. The light above becomes a point of opening to subtler realms of perception. Awareness begins to receive impressions that lie beyond ordinary sight. 34. Or, all of this may arise in a sudden flash of illumination. Sometimes knowledge does not unfold step by step. It appears all at once, as if a deeper light breaks through and reveals what was hidden. 35. By focusing on the heart, knowledge of the mind arises. The heart serves as the seat of subtle awareness. Through sustained attention there, the true nature and movements of consciousness become directly known. 36. By distinguishing between pure awareness and the mind, one gains knowledge of the true self. What seemed solid and real changes when observed closely. By distinguishing the impermanent from the unchanging, awareness recognizes its own essential nature. 37. From this arise heightened perception, extraordinary hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. As the senses become refined, they operate with much greater clarity and sensitivity than usual. 38. These powers are distractions to deep meditation, though they may appear as abilities in the outward state. All the siddhis, powers that we are reading about, those above and those which follow, can pull you away from the path. They are simply side effects of practice and are not to be seen as the goal of practice. 39. By loosening the causes of bondage and understanding the pathways of the mind, awareness can enter another body. This refers to extreme mastery over consciousness, not literal body hopping for most people, but deep detachment from identification with the body. 40. By mastering the energy that moves upward in the body, one becomes unaffected by water, mud, or obstacles and can rise above them. This is pointing to a deep control over the body's internal energies. In traditional language, it can sound like levitation, but at a more grounded level, it's about becoming so steady and internally lifted that external conditions no longer weigh you down in the same way, physically or mentally. 41. By mastering the internal fire, one gains radiance. Here, internal fire refers to vitality and transformation within the body and mind. As that becomes balanced and strong, it naturally expresses itself outwardly as clarity, presence, and even a kind of brightness in how a person carries themselves, as if they are glowing from within. 42. By attuning to the relationship between ear and space, one gains extraordinary hearing. This is not just about hearing distant sounds. It's more about refining perception so deeply that you begin to notice subtler layers of experience, tones, silence, and even the space in which sound arises. 43. By attuning to the relationship between body and space, and becoming light like cotton, one can move freely through space. This describes a profound sense of lightness. Rather than feeling dense, stuck, or limited by the body, there's a sense of ease and freedom in movement, as if the usual heaviness of physical existence has softened. 44. Meditation beyond the body, on the unimagined, removes the veil covering inner light. When awareness is no longer tied to the body, clarity dawns. The usual filters drop away, and a more direct, clear kind of knowing begins to emerge. 45. By mastering the elements, gross and subtle, their essence, interaction, and purpose, one gains control over them. This is about deeply understanding the building blocks of experience, both physical and subtle. As that understanding becomes complete, your relationship with the world changes from being reactive and controlling to being aligned and intentional. 46. From this arises mastery over the body, including the ability to become as small as an atom, as large as desired, light, heavy, or otherwise unconstrained. This sutra is pointing directly to the classical siddhis: expansion, contraction, weightlessness, and so on. At its deepest level, it's describing a state where the body is no longer experienced as fixed or limiting. Awareness is no longer bound by ordinary physical constraints, and the practitioner relates to form as something fluid rather than solid. 47. From this come perfection of the body, beauty, strength, and resilience. As the system becomes more balanced and integrated, the body reflects that harmony. Strength, health, and even appearance improve. Again, not as a goal, but as a natural side effect of inner order. 48. Mastery over the senses comes from understanding their nature, function, identity, and purpose. Instead of being pulled around by what you see, hear, or feel, you begin to understand how the senses work. That understanding gives you the ability to engage with them consciously, rather than automatically reacting. 49. From this comes speed of mind, independence from the body, and mastery over nature. As attachment to the body and senses loosens, awareness becomes quicker and more flexible. You're no longer limited in the same way by physical or habitual constraints, and your experience of reality opens up significantly. 50. One who sees clearly the distinction between pure awareness and nature gains mastery over all states and forms of existence. This is a major turning point, true discrimination, viveka. You see what you are and what you are not. When you clearly see the difference between what is observing and what is being observed, you stop confusing yourself with your thoughts, body, or experiences. And this changes everything. 51. By releasing even attachment to this mastery, the seeds of bondage are destroyed, and awareness knows that it stands alone. Even this level of clarity can become something you cling to. Patanjali is saying that real freedom comes only when you let go of all identification, even with insight or power. 52. When invited by higher beings, one should remain unattached, avoiding pride or distraction. As the mind becomes more refined, unusual experiences can arise. Visions, divine experiences, or a sense of being recognized by spiritual beings. The warning here is simple. Don't get caught up in these, because the ego can quietly rebuild itself around those experiences, and suffering reappear. 53. By discerning even the smallest moments and their sequence, one gains true insight. You begin to see reality at its finest resolution, noticing how each micro-moment arises and passes. This kind of attention reveals patterns that are normally invisible. 54. This discriminative insight reveals truth directly, beyond the limits of time and sequence. At this stage, knowing is no longer something that unfolds step by step. Instead of piecing things together through analysis, there is a direct seeing that isn't bound by past, present, or future. It's immediate and whole. 55. The knowledge born of discrimination is liberating insight, encompassing all objects in all conditions beyond sequence. This is not ordinary knowledge unfolding step by step. It is a direct, comprehensive seeing in which everything is understood at once without fragmentation. Through this clarity, all phenomena are recognized as distinct from pure awareness. Nothing remains confused or entangled. 56. When the luminosity of the mind is purified to the same clarity as pure awareness, liberation is realized. The mind, refined to its most transparent state, no longer distorts or colors what is seen. It reflects pure awareness so perfectly that the distinction between the two is no longer experienced as confusion. Pure awareness stands revealed in its own nature, and this recognition is liberation. Book 4, Kaivalya. 1. Supernatural powers may arise through birth, herbs, mantra, austerity, or samadhi. Extraordinary abilities are not solely the result of practice. They can appear through various causes, some natural, some cultivated, but none of these in themselves are liberation. 2. The transformation into another state of being occurs through the unfolding of inherent nature. Change is not imposed from outside. What emerges was already latent, coming forth as conditions allow. Practice removes obstacles. It does not create the essential nature. 3. The instrumental cause does not initiate transformation. It removes obstacles, like a farmer opening a channel for water. Practice does not force growth. It clears what obstructs it. When the blockages are removed, the natural movement of transformation proceeds on its own. 4. Constructed minds arise from the sense of individuality alone. Multiple layers or expressions of mind can form, but they all stem from an underlying sense of I. This root identification gives rise to varied mental structures. 5. Though the activities of these minds differ, one consciousness directs them. Behind the many movements and functions of mind, there is a single organizing awareness. The diversity of thought does not imply multiple consciousnesses. 6. Among these, the mind born of meditation is free from latent impressions. A mind refined through deep meditation does not carry the same conditioning as ordinary thought. It functions without the residue of past impressions. 7. The actions of the yogi are neither pure nor impure. For others, actions may be pure, impure, or both. For one established in clarity, actions no longer bind or accumulate consequence. For others, actions generate effects, beneficial, harmful, or mixed. 8. From these actions, only those impressions arise that correspond to the latent tendencies. Not all actions bear fruit equally. Only those aligned with existing tendencies take root and manifest, reinforcing what is already present. 9. Memory and impressions are linked, even across time, place, and circumstance. Latent impressions persist beyond immediate experience. They can reappear regardless of gaps in time or changes in context, maintaining continuity of pattern. 10. These impressions have no beginning, as the will to live is eternal. The chain of conditioning stretches back without a discernible starting point. The impulse toward continuity sustains the flow of impressions. 11. Impressions are sustained by cause, effect, support, and object. When these cease, the impressions cease. Conditioning depends on specific factors. Remove the causes and supports, and the impressions no longer arise. Without fuel, they fall away. 12. The past and future are immanent in every object, appearing as different sectors within the same continuous flow of experience. An object contains its entire history and potential. Past and future do not vanish or appear from nowhere. They are simply different stages in a single unfolding stream. 13. These stages are expressed through the qualities of nature, the gunas, whether subtle or manifest. All experience, seen or unseen, arises through the interplay of the gunas. They shape both the visible world and its subtler foundations. 14. The unity of an object is maintained through the coherence of its transformations. Though things appear to change, they retain continuity. What we call an object persists through a sequence of transformations that remain linked. 15. Though the object is the same, differences in perception arise from differences in mind. What is perceived depends on the condition of the perceiver. The same object may appear differently according to the state of mind observing it. 16. An object is not dependent on a single mind. Otherwise, it would cease when not perceived. Reality is not created by individual perception alone. Objects persist independently of whether a particular mind is attending to them. 17. An object is known or unknown depending on whether the mind is colored by it. Perception occurs when the mind takes the form of what it observes. Without this correspondence, the object remains unrecognized. 18. The movements of the mind are always known to awareness, which is unchanging. Awareness does not fluctuate with the mind. It remains constant, illuminating every thought, whether the mind is active or still. 19. The mind is not self-luminous, as it is itself an object of perception. The mind can be observed. Therefore, it is not the source of awareness. It is something known, not the knower. 20. It cannot perceive both itself and another simultaneously. The mind cannot fully grasp itself while also attending to external objects. Its attention moves, but does not divide in that way. 21. If the mind were to perceive itself, it would lead to an infinite regression and to confusion. If the mind were both the observer and the observed, another mind would be required to observe that act, and so on without end. To avoid this, there must be a distinction. The mind is known, and awareness is what knows it. 22. Awareness, though unchanging, appears to take on the form of the mind when reflected in it. Awareness itself does not change, but seems to adopt the qualities of the mind it illuminates, just as a clear surface reflects what appears before it. 23. The mind, colored by both seer and seen, becomes capable of all perceptions. Because it reflects both awareness and objects, the mind serves as the medium through which all experience becomes possible. 24. Though filled with countless impressions, the mind exists for the sake of another. The mind is not an end in itself. Its function is to serve awareness, providing the field through which experience is revealed. 25. For one who sees clearly, the identification with the mind comes to an end. When discrimination becomes steady, the confusion between awareness and mind dissolves. The sense of I am the mind falls away. 26. Consciousness, oriented toward this distinction, moves toward freedom, the clear knowledge that awareness is independent of nature. As discrimination stabilizes, the confusion between awareness and the workings of nature falls away. The mind aligns with this clarity, and its movement no longer binds. It supports the recognition of complete independence. 27. In the gaps of recognizing awareness, other impressions may still arise from past conditioning. Even with insight, residual tendencies can surface. These are remnants of earlier conditioning, not signs of regression. 28. These are resolved in the same way as other afflictions. The remaining impressions are dissolved through the same process of meditation, clear seeing, and non-identification that removed earlier obstacles. 29. For one established in continuous discrimination, even attachment to insight falls away. At a certain point, even the subtlest attachment to knowledge or clarity itself is relinquished. Nothing is held on to. 30. With this realization, the causes of suffering and the cycle of action and consequence come to an end. When the distinction between awareness and nature is fully known, the roots of affliction dissolve. Action no longer generates binding results, and the cycle that sustained experience and suffering is brought to completion. 31. Then knowledge, free from all coverings, becomes boundless. What remains to be known is negligible. When obscurations fall away, clarity is unobstructed. Compared to this, all limited knowledge appears insignificant. 32. Then the continuous flow of transformation, shaped by the qualities of nature, comes to an end, having fulfilled its purpose. What once appeared as an unbroken stream of change is seen for what it is. With nothing left to sustain it, the activity of the gunas subsides. Their role, to provide experience and eventual clarity, has been completed. 33. This flow is understood as a succession of discrete moments, each giving rise to the next. What seemed continuous is revealed as a sequence of subtle transitions. Each moment arises and passes, forming the appearance of continuity, but never existing as a fixed whole. 34. When the qualities of nature are seen as no longer relevant to awareness, they return to their source, and awareness stands alone, established in its own nature. This is liberation. With nothing left to reveal, the movements of nature fall silent. Awareness is no longer entangled with what it observes. It remains as it is, self-established, complete. This is Kaivalya. And so we have come to the end of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Here, the journey of yoga reaches its final consummation, the freedom of pure awareness, resting in its own true nature. Beyond effort, beyond thought, beyond even the subtlest powers of the mind, there remains only the seer, clear, eternal, and free. May these sutras remain with you, not only as ideas to consider, but as truths to be contemplated and lived. Thank you for listening.